Hey, folks, welcome. Thanks for joining me. As you might notice, it's a sunny day outside, which lights up my eyeballs. And for some reason, that's more attractive. You notice the number of photo shoots where they're like looking into the list. For some reason, if you're just like, then people are like, they're beautiful because there's a light shining at their eyes. It seems like that's probably a flaw in our evolution that we somehow think that matters. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well out there. Thanks for joining me. Please take a second to subscribe, hit the thumbs up. That shit actually matters because it changes the algorithm, and the algorithm owns us. And I hope you understand that. Got a great episode for you today, talking about, the death of a livable planet, fun topics like that. But guess what? We have to, because is there anything more important? So there is that. If you get a second, join my Patreon at patreon.com/Lee Camp. As you might know, my TV show shut down, all past episodes banned globally, and my podcast deleted from Spotify. So I believe I'm the most censored comedian in America at this moment. Not sure. Maybe someone could make a debate. But anyway, I've got a great guest for you on this topic, on the topic of climate change, climate catastrophe. You couldn't ask for a better authority, so I'm just going to kind of dive right into it. This is NASA climate scientist Peter Kalmus. Hello.
Thanks
Thanks for joining
me.
me. Yeah,
I'm
thanks a lot.
wearing my ugly but comfy sweater right now.
I was going to say
I just realized.
I was going to say it's an ugly sweater live
really
stream.
is,
so yeah,
but it's an old favorite. Been on so many backpacking trips too, I can't even count them.
Oh yeah, I bet it does well in the cold weather, the cold weather we have left. Yes.
Yeah, if it gets wet too, it does really well. So good job, old crappy sweater.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to have you on. I could have had you on any week, but this is a particularly good week because there was just a very large protest. I think over 1,000 scientists were involved, many arrested, trying to raise attention for the climate catastrophe, trying to demand a climate revolution, which I think is the terminology we need to adapt to, because that's kind of the only chance left. So I guess, could you start by talking about those actions?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the Working Group 3 report from the IPCC. Working Group 3 report was released last Monday, and it detailed sort of the kind of what we need to do to keep a livable planet, right? So the first working group report, which came out last year, is about the physical basis, like the climate science, right? The basic climate science, like how the planet is responding, what the ice is doing, what the ocean is doing, how things are changing in the forests and the wildfires and all of that. The second one is about impacts, how those changes are affecting humans and ecosystems. And the third one is about what we can do as basically a global civilization to keep a livable planet, or as much of a livable planet as we can still keep. And this report was really harrowing. And so there's a group called Scientist Rebellion, which is a loose group of a bunch of scientists around the world who are deeply, deeply concerned and feel like we can't sit on the sidelines anymore and just do our science. We have to get out in the streets, and we have to get into good trouble. So we planned a global action on Wednesday, two days, time to be 2 days after the release of that report. And basically the report says we have to have a moratorium on all new fossil fuel infrastructure, and we have to ramp down the fossil fuel industry, right? That's like top line. Yeah. And guess what world leaders are doing right now? Like, as that report was out, and of course completely underreported in the media in quite a shocking way. And even while the scientists were saying that, as a group, collectively, the world leaders are calling for expansion of the fossil fuel industry, which is exactly the opposite of what the scientists are saying. So then the world leaders aren't saying, they're not listening to us. They're giving us a big middle finger, right? And they're
Right.
saying we're gonna keep the fossil fuel money train rolling, even though the scientists are telling us that we're on the verge of losing a livable planet because of that. They don't seem to care. So what else can we do? Like, I've tried so many things to wake up the world to this planetary emergency over the last like 16 years, and none of it worked. And I feel like I'm being not listened to. I feel like my kids' actual lives are in jeopardy. I feel like I can't live in Southern California anymore because it's too hot and there's too many fires and there's not enough water, all because of global heating. Um, so I don't understand how much more it's going to take, but I decided that the future of the planet and my son's lives they're much more important than anything about me. They're more important than my job. They're more important than my life. Frankly, I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of years of degradation on this beautiful planet, and my kids. And what most parents, I think, would, if faced with the choice, and no one wants to be faced with this choice, but when faced with the choice, most parents would not hesitate to give their lives for their kids. So to just go do civil disobedience and risk arrest is like it's at this point, it's a very, very small ask, and it's a very, very small sacrifice compared to everything that's on the line. So that's what I did. I went down to JP Morgan Chase Bank in downtown Los Angeles, because out of all the institutions on the planet, they do the most to finance new fossil fuel projects, which, like I said, is what has to stop. So it seemed like a good location for our action. We worked with Extinction Rebellion Los Angeles, which has a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff. And they know it's complicated, right? Because there's support roles. You need a police liaison. You need jail support. You need to line up legal support. And you have to actually kind of like plan a good action, that you have to think of all the contingencies, stuff that can go wrong, try to anticipate what the police will do. So it's really helpful, very, very helpful to have support from people who have some experience with all of this stuff. And we met in Pershing Square, which is kind of like the de facto meeting ground for activism in Los Angeles. And we walked to JP Morgan Chase, which is about a 10-minute walk away. And I just walked right up to the double doors there, took out a kind of one of those chain kryptonite locks, locked the door handles together. And there were 4 of us risking arrest. So 2 partners on the other pair of double doors did the same. And then we just locked our wrists with chains and a padlock to the handle. Done. It was so easy. Like, I was a little worried that as we were walking up, the security personnel would be like, those guys look suspicious, and like basically tackle us. But it wasn't like that at all. Somebody was going into those doors. So we just kind of paused as we went up the steps, waited for that person to go in, and then just did it.
And what makes this different, I think, than, many activists have been active for years on various causes. But what makes this different is this is people who have not, they're not like, they haven't set their lives up around going against the state, interrupting business as usual. This is scientists and others that have kind of been pushed to this point because they've seen the harm that is happening.
I don't want to do stuff like this. Like, I don't even want to do interviews like this. Like, I'm introverted. I'd rather just sit and do my science and be with my family and go backpacking and coach soccer, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to do any of this, but I feel pushed to do this because we are on the brink of losing everything. We're on the brink of irreversibly losing a planet that's as livable as we've all grown to take for granted, unfortunately. So I personally don't think humanity is going to go extinct. I think there will be, in the worst case scenario, still pockets of humans kind of closer to the poles. But I do think that we are on track to lose civilization as we know it, and to end up with a planet that can't support anywhere near 8 billion people, right? Which means that billions of people would die.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people don't understand maybe is, even on the path to that future you're describing, there is going to be just immense hardship, and there already is, but it will keep increasing. And the number of climate refugees is already in the millions. So this isn't a future thing. This is now.
That's right. And those refugees that number could easily climb into the hundreds of millions. I mean, that we're on track for equatorial Earth, like the tropics of the Earth, to become uninhabitable. It's going to be too hot and humid for the human body to survive down there near the tropics if we continue emitting fossil fuels the way we're doing. And it depends on how bad we let it get, but that's easily 1 billion people right there that are going to have to move closer to the poles. And that's the global south. And they've literally contributed almost nothing to this emergency. I mean, the justice aspect of this is just heartbreaking. And we've seen the global north doing everything they can, even just in the most recent COP26, to wiggle out of their responsibility and not give any support to the global south, right? So it's like the rich global north countries are being so incredibly miserly and unwilling to, and it's just, to me, it's kind of inhuman. It doesn't matter to me what country someone was born into. They're human like me. And it's just heartbreaking. I think we're on a path right now towards increased autocracy, towards increased nationalism, towards increased warfare that could be kind of sparked by lack of resources and climate impacts, like droughts, for example. So when countries don't have water, they can't grow food. When they can't grow food, their society basically collapses and warfare starts. So yeah, I can't sit on the sidelines. I feel a moral obligation to speak out and now to engage in civil disobedience. And I really hope a huge number of scientists start doing the same, and frankly, journalists too. I think scientists and journalists there's this kind of social norm that they're supposed to stay unbiased,
above the fray.
Exactly. But we're humans too, and we're citizens. And when we see everything that we know and love at risk because of some fucking rich people that already have more money than they know what to do with, but they want more and they want to hold on to their power, we need to get off the sidelines. We need to take action, because if we don't, who will? And there's this kind of global bystander effect. So the bystander effect is when, say, there's somebody lying in a pool of blood on the ground and a crowd gathers around, and everyone sort of expects somebody else to do first aid and call the ambulance, right? So it's a well-documented sort of group psychological effect. I think we're in a similar situation now, except our entire planet is the thing that's lying on the ground and bleeding to death right now. And the public is kind of in this deer in the headlights sort of mode, partly, I think, because they're looking to the experts, which are the scientists and the journalists. And most of the scientists and the journalists are doing this thing that's, in my opinion, at this moment in Earth's history, a mistake of trying to act I don't know, they're trying to act like things are normal, but they're not normal. So everyone's what should we do? They're telling us there's a problem, but they're acting like it's normal. And so they're not, the public's not treating this like the emergency that it is.
Well, and in terms of the journalists, they basically have ignored climate change for years now. Yeah. And they do it for multiple reasons. One is because many of these outlets are funded by big oil. Another is because they just know that climate change articles or whatever don't get a lot of views or a lot of clicks. So if you're a writer who wants to impress your boss, you're not going to go after the topic that doesn't do well. So that's part of it. I do remember, I mean, and people, there's many people who like to say, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about climate change. But if you actually look at the numbers, MSNBC is not actually doing tons of climate change coverage. And
I saw an amazing statistic the other day that when Bezos did his space stunt, where he went into almost space,
for
in his
4 minutes.
rocket. That got more coverage. That got like 212 hours of coverage or something total, which was like, and then for in one 1 or 2 days, right? And then for the whole year, all the media of the world, like the major media of the world, I'm not sure how they measured it, but it was like apples to apples comparison, was like about 220 hours. So Bezos' space stunt in a couple of days got like almost as much media coverage as climate breakdown did in the whole year. It's crazy.
Right. That's the insanity we live in. And you know, they did a
Yeah.
study a couple of years ago, and you know, NBC News, like some of their flagship shows had like 1 mention or 2 mentions of climate change for the entire year. But I did
President
see
Biden, he barely mentioned it in his State of the Union. It was like just like, oh, like I can see his speech where it's like, you know what, you better just mention climate at least once. I mean, like, it's almost like telling us that they don't care about it. Like that, like paltry mention is almost worse than just not mentioning it, because you know like how that conversation went down.
Yeah. Biden has done less than nothing on it.
Just as those of us who were paying attention during the primaries knew that would happen.
That would happen. Yeah. And you know, so your choices between Trump, or the Republicans who say it doesn't exist, and then the Democrats like Obama, who might say it exists, but Obama proudly said he laid more oil pipeline than any president before him.
Yeah, at Rice University. Yeah, he was bragging about his expansion of fossil fuels. He bragged about that more than anything he did. He didn't brag about anything he did on climate that much, because I just don't think it was really his focus. Like, he didn't. One of my first kind of major publications ever in terms of speaking out about climate change was a little letter to the editor I wrote to the New York Times, that right after they called Obama's reelection in what year was that? 2012. And it was like late at night. I was like, you know, my family had gone to sleep already, and I felt so strongly that, you know, Obama needed to turn this into his legacy. Like, I knew that he wasn't like as progressive as I was, which was deeply disappointing to me. But I'm like, come on, like, China's going to eat our lunch. Like, this is a chance. The Green New Deal would like bring so many jobs. It'd be the best thing for our economy, and Obama should make this his legacy. And they published that letter. But of course that didn't happen. And that's not happening now with President Biden either. And it's a tragedy. I mean, look, the president right now in a climate emergency has an opportunity to be one of the best presidents in the history of the United States by actually doing something about climate change. And yet he comes from fossil fuel industry. He's cronies with all the fossil fuel industry guys, and he's picking them over our planet. And it's just a tragedy.
So let's talk a little about the actual science. Like, what is it that we aren't getting from our mainstream media? What little we do get about the science that people need to know. And, you know, it is amazing that even people that I would consider left wing, many of them are like, they still fall into either the science is still out or that kind of garbage. And it kind of blows my mind.
So I would say that a lot of the corporate media they do a good job actually on reporting the science. Like the New York Times climate desk, I think they do a great job. What's not happening is the front page headlines that tell the overall story that we're heading towards an unlivable planet. I had a tweet go viral a couple of days ago after I got back from jail. Basically, I finally found some time to tweet this thing that the LA Times did on Tuesday, the day after the IPCC report. They had this little, they call these little things on the bottom right of the front page reefers that are like the stories that didn't make it to the front page, but like are in like on page 3 or 4 or whatever. So they had one of those in the bottom right of the bottom fold of the front page of the LA Times that was like, Earth on track to become, quote, unlivable.
Right. It's a little thing in the corner.
Yeah, and then it was like World A3. And I just thought that was like the most don't look up moment that I'd ever kind of seen. Like it was just so over the top. And then you get actual climate denial, like you pointed out. So this, for some reason, this always seems to happen in England. I don't know what it is about the BBC and the LBC and like Good Morning Britain. These major British shows. They for some so okay. First of all, climate activism is a lot. It's a lot more punk in England than it is here. Like it's really hard to get activists out in the streets in the United States. But in England, they come out in great numbers, and they do things like block roads, and they inconvenience the people trying to get to work and stuff. And so for some reason, so people get frustrated, understandably. Although it's ironic because, one of my favorite kind of things was this tweet from like a year or two ago, which showed like uh, uh, roads in Europe, just like in towns, like roads like lined with shops and houses on both sides, just like turned into rivers from these flash floods, basically, from global heating, like driven by climate change. And it basically said, like, if you think that us blocking the street for a few minutes to raise awareness on climate change is inconvenient, wait till everything floods like this, right?
Right. So, wait till your house is on fire and tell us how inconvenient it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, these brave activists are standing up for a livable planet and for their fucking futures. And then they get called onto these shows, and the hosts, who are all like, they're polished and they've talked to, they do this for a living. They try to go after these young activists and try to make them look like fools. But these activists they're brilliant, and they stand up to it, and they turn it right around on the host. So there's these, like, you can find these videos on Twitter of like these British kind of older always male talk show hosts being just like taken down by these like young activists with like face piercings and stuff, who just stand up to them and don't take any of their shit, and like reveal to them what they are, is like kind of leading. Basically, it's very, very hard to have. Okay, let me take a step back and talk about theory of change. All right. So we have a fossil fuel industry, which is incredibly rich, one of the richest industries in the history of humanity, which for like a tiny fraction of their money, they can buy politicians. It's like, if it's for them, it's like they might as well, like, should I go to the store and buy a jar of peanuts, or should I buy this congressperson, right? Like, oh, it's all the same to me. It costs about the same, right? So we're arrayed against this incredibly powerful, rich group of people that doesn't want climate action, and they've purchased our politicians. They've purchased a lot of the media, and it's incredibly hard to build. We need I don't think that the people in power now are going to voluntarily relinquish their power and money, because we need to transform everything about society. We certainly need to you need to redistribute wealth to solve this problem, because you can't just let the price of gas go through the roof. The working class people who aren't being told the truth by the media will rebel, right? They'll say, I can't even get to my job. I can't feed my kids. What the hell? So you need to basically have policies in place so that as you ramp down the fossil fuel industry, you protect the working class. And that's fundamentally redistributive in terms of wealth. So I don't think that the people in charge are going to go for that voluntarily. So the only other option to save the livability of our planet is to create a movement that crosses parties, that involves the working class, involves like every part of society, which is stronger than the fossil fuel industry. It's very, very hard to do that when the media is not telling the truth about how bad the situation actually is. So when I went and got arrested, I risked arrest, chaining myself to JP Morgan Chase, the biggest funder of fossil fuel projects on the planet. And after about 4 hours, I was indeed arrested, along with 2 other scientists and an engineer. And guess how much reporting by the mainstream corporate media there was of climates, and this was in solidarity with other actions around the world. How much reporting by the corporate mainstream media was there that climate scientists, the people who know the best, are getting so desperate by the inaction of world leaders that they are risking arrest? There was zero. Okay, so was not in the New York Times, was not in USA Today, wasn't even in the LA Times.
And then LA Times offices are about a block away, right?
It wasn't, right, and it wasn't even in the Guardian. So the Guardian published an op-ed I wrote, which was great. So that I love their opinion. Their opinion desk is they're doing God's work over at the Guardian, but it wasn't worthy of the reporters to write a kind of a news piece about the event, even for the Guardian. So I don't really know what it's going to take, but I think that the average citizen should be extremely concerned when climate scientists are so desperate that we're willing to risk arrest, and the mainstream corporate media is not even willing to tell that story, because it makes it, and they know this, right? The people in charge know this. It's very, very, it's infinitely harder to start a movement that can stand up to that's strong enough to stand up to the fossil fuel industry if people don't understand that the entire planet and everything that they love is at risk. And that's the top line story that's not being told. Like, they'll do a great story about like coral reefs, or they'll do a great story about some new study that comes out about this or that, and that's great. But they're giving little pieces of the elephant, but they're refusing to report the main story, which is that the entire planet is at risk.
I did see one in USA Today. I did see one article about, let's see, how it's the end of the world, but they had to couch it in like a bizarre humor column that's like completely unfunny in like multiple ways. But it's just it's a humor column about how, yay, we did it, we destroyed the planet, and you're like, well, I guess that's better than nothing. But it's like they can't actually do the legit reporting on this topic.
Here, I'm going to go to my, can you get to my Twitter? I'm going to retweet that so it's at the top, so it's easy for you to find the one about the LA Times, just so you can see it. Hold on. Can you do that, or is that too hard?
No, it's fine. It's just twitter.com/Peter Kalmus.
No, /ClimateHuman.
Oh, Climate Human.
Okay, coming back to, all right. This is like real time.
Yeah.
We're like delving into Twitter and a live show.
Which one do you, the Tiny Earth on Track?
Yeah. The one I just retweeted. So it should be at the second thing down, like after my pinned tweet.
Okay.
So yeah. I have the actual paper in the other room. I mean, I just took a photo with my phone. So like I had the paper copy.
So here it is, the tiny little blurb in the corner of the newspaper.
The bottom right of the newspaper. Right. Yeah. Isn't that just like the most don't look up thing you've ever seen?
It's incredible. So
let's analyze it for just a second.
Yeah,
I love the way they put unlivable in quotes, as if like they don't fully believe that that's the case.
Well, right. It almost makes it makes people look that are saying that look a little crazy. Like, it's going to be unlivable. You know, you put quotes around it.
And then I love the way they call the IPCC report, which is like probably the largest collaboration of scientists ever convened in the history of humanity, right? And they just say a report says. That part kind of killed me too. I'm like, wow. And then world, A3. It's just don't. Yeah.
I saw something similar on like Wall Street Journal. It had a little blurb on the side that said, you know, report says climate change destroying the planet or something. And meanwhile, like the top headline getting most of the paper was Elon Musk buys 9% of Twitter.
Yeah.
It's like that fills the news, but Earth ending, not so much.
We talked about like the whole Will Smith thing for like 2 or 3 times as long as we talked about the IPCC report coming out, right? I mean, it's just like, I think the media and it's not, so I think there's a lot, first of all, I want to say that there's a lot of reporters who are doing great work. And I think a lot of them agree that the way their institutions are covering this is not good. So it's more like the senior editors. And I just don't know, like they've got to, just like the scientists are taking a stand and kind of like responding to something higher than us and something higher than our jobs, right? I think these senior editors in the media have to start doing the same thing, and they have to be like, well, all right, right, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? Like right now, this stuff's not getting a ton of clicks because people don't really know, but we have to start reporting it the way it really is, but so that people know, and then it'll start being like, it's just, I don't know, like how do you break through this, right? There's like this wall of, to me it's almost like the social stuff that's keeping us from like not only just acting about this but from even really talking about it. It's almost like a real physical thing that I can feel, like the social, what would you call them, sort of walls and mazes and kind of structures. They're not, you can't touch them, but they're very real.
Well, there's a lot of things that stop. I mean, psychologically, there's a lot of things that are stopping people from caring and getting really active and speaking endlessly about climate change. One is that the outrage of the day is kind of how our social media works. So if it's a same story every day, that doesn't work. It's got to be something new. There's also the fact that I think people get overwhelmed and they choose different paths to deal with the fact that they're overwhelmed and they feel scared and insecure. One is to believe it's not real. Another is to believe, well, the higher up people have it. They'll do something. They'll figure it out.
Another is bystander effect I was talking about.
Yeah. Another is just like, well, what could I do? The planet's warming. Like I'm one person that has, I work as an accountant somewhere. I have no influence over anything that could impact this.
That's how I started, by the way. Like I was just that person who's like, damn, this is overwhelming. What do I do? So I even wrote a book about how I started out doing stuff because it felt better to me to do something at least than to do nothing. And so I was starting out when there wasn't even a climate movement. Now there's a climate movement. It's pretty strong. Scientists are getting arrested. Young people are like blocking oil trains, etc. Right. So, a bunch of activists on Saturday went out and did a arrestable action in front of Joe Manchin's personal dirty coal plant in West Virginia. So I think now the people that feel overwhelmed, there's so many options for activism and to get involved that there's less of an excuse now than when I started out. When I started out, there was basically no climate movement. There was Citizens Climate Lobby. There was 350. That was like almost pretty much it. And so I'm like, I don't think these groups are really cutting it. So I want to explore more. So I started reducing my own emissions, which was a lot of fun. Like, I know that's not going to now, at the time I was like, well, maybe if I do this, so I did it because it felt disgusting to me to burn fossil fuel. And I'm like, wow, that was actually really fun. I really enjoyed, it took me about 2 years to really just cut my emissions by like a factor of 10. And I'm like, wow, that was really fun. And like, I really learned a ton from that. And I didn't see anyone at all at the time. It's like around 2014. No one was saying that reducing your emissions could be fun. So I wrote a book, and then that gave me a platform, switch into climate science, and now like here I am. So,
but do you worry that feeds into a little bit of what kind of big oil wants, is to make people think, oh, it's your individual job.
I just got fucking arrested, Lee. I mean, it's not the only thing.
I'm not saying you. I'm
you
talking
can do
about
both. You can do more than one thing, right? So
of course.
Yeah. So big oil would love it if we didn't organize. And so we absolutely need to organize. That's like job number one. But like I don't think that it's good for climate activists to basically be telling people they should not bother reducing their emissions. I mean, just because, so like what if the climate, like let's say like what if the fossil fuel industry was like, oh, we want climate activists to organize? Like, would people be like, oh, that's what the fossil fuel industry says, we shouldn't do it? I mean, like, just, yeah. So certainly they would love to distract us with that. But any reasonable person, I think, can realize that we should do kind of all of the above. See, I don't actually push very much for people to reduce their own emissions. I do think it's a great thing for people to do.
I agree with all that.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I wasn't saying don't do it, and I haven't owned a car in years. And
again, for me, this has been a 16-year learning process, right?
Yeah.
And I've been desperate to find ways to gain traction. And before there was a movement, I mean, like I said, I'm really introverted, so I'm not like a natural organizer. So, so for me, the kind of one of the first things I tried to reduce my emissions. It was just a natural choice. Like I didn't see a lot of other options. And I really learned a lot about how we're all kind of imbricated and just involved in these systems that if you want to eat, you got to get food. Well, unless you like have like 10 acres somewhere and you devote your entire time to growing your own food as a subsistence farmer, you're going to buy that from the grocery store, and that's produced with fossil fuels no matter what. Same thing with clothes, same things with getting to work. So you can reduce, but you can't obsess over it because you see where the system has to change, right?
And speaking of food, I know one of the greatest causes of climate change emissions is animal agriculture and factory farming, and so I've tried to talk a lot about that as well. But of course, that's kind of like a third rail also for our media.
Yes.
They can't ever talk about that.
Well, so the climate movement is so complicated, and there's a lot of people out there who have like their one thing that they think is going to save the world, whether it's nuclear or going vegan or whatever it is. And to me, I find that really toxic. Like we really need an all of the above approach. It's going to take like a million different things to completely transform society. So I don't think that what the fossil fuel industry really wants is for us to be like, you can't say that. Like you have to message it my way. Like you have to, my approach is the right one, right? And then you get all these big egos fighting each other. Yeah. And the fossil fuel executives are just like laughing and counting their, like looking at their bank account numbers. And
all right, I don't want to use up all your time. I have two more questions. One, I wanted to talk about Don't Look Up because I did several videos on that. I think it's both an excellent film and an important film. It ended up becoming one of the most ever viewed Netflix films.
Second most, yeah.
Second most ever. And I'm wondering, did that feel like it broke through, or is it the kind of thing where people still just kind of ignore the real message of the film?
Oh, I think it was hugely influential. Okay. I think it made a huge difference, but obviously one movie is not going to solve global heating. So it was a huge step in the right direction. And I think one of the most important things so it did two really important things, right? Besides just raising awareness. So key things besides raising awareness, it showed that there's a viable financial path for climate storytelling in the mainstream, which is really important. So again, like what I've been saying about the news media also applies to the storytelling media, the entertainment media. You need media getting out to the masses. It has to get out from behind climate Twitter and kind of the diehard climate activists and to the mainstream. And that's not happening in the news media. And Don't Look Up was kind of the first time it happened in the entertainment media. And it was economically viable. It made bank for Netflix. So hopefully now there's writers and producers and directors all over the world thinking of creative ways to do something similar, but maybe telling a different climate story. Like how about telling a story about humanity making the right decisions from now and like kind of a darker, hotter future, but like at least, hey, we saved what we could. We feel solidarity. We're like a more humbled species that's grateful to be part of the web of life, right? I think that would be a fascinating story to tell through like character development and whatnot. So that's number one. It showed like a viable path. Number two, it gave climate people and people who aren't climate people, just normal people, words and articulations for what's happening right now in real life, especially in terms of the media silence, right? So just earlier in this interview, I'm like, that thing that LA Times did, I've never seen anything more Don't Look Up than that, right? And everyone knows what I'm talking about now. That is huge, just to be able to have that common language now. And every time I post something like that, there's all of these memes from Don't Look Up. It's a common language that we have now, and it puts the media in
giving people the language to use to talk about these things, like Occupy created the 99% and things like that.
Yeah. I think Don't Look Up might have been, it's at that level of kind of awareness raising and solidarity building, because language is solidarity, right? When we share language like that, like the 99%.
So I think last question, what would you what would you like to see happen in a large scale, but also two people out there who are feeling exactly what we were saying earlier, what could I possibly do to impact global climate change? What would you say to them? Get involved in these actions that interrupt business as usual.
I'd say go get into good trouble. And I think everyone knows what I mean by that.
Yeah.
I would love to see a huge ramp up in climate civil disobedience right now. So if anyone, and if you can't take that risk yet, like it took me a while to prepare for that mentally and to like get my loved ones sort of on board with that. Because when you're like, if you have a spouse, for example, who's against it, that can really hold you back, right? So it's a subtle thing and it takes some time.
Or kids who want, food and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I would say ultimately, it varies by country to country, but it was absolutely a thing worth doing, in my opinion. And I think I would love more people to experience that sort of that psychological and spiritual growth that occurs when you risk good trouble like that, and the feeling of solidarity that you get. It's so deep. It's incredibly deep to go get arrested for your kids and for a livable planet. So that right now, that's my number one thing. A very, very clear ask of people. But if you can't do that, then support those people who are ready to do that. So there's legal fees and whatnot. The media is not reporting it. So retweet the hell out of stuff like that on social media. Just get the word out, make YouTube videos, make TikToks, whatever. Get the word out, because the corporate media is not getting the word out. And then there's a million other things you can do. You can start your own organization. You can just talk to everyone around you. You can give a talk at your library. You can start learning about the science and let people know. The basic science is that no matter where you look in the Earth system, you can look at ocean heat, you can look at surface heating, you can look at plants and animals moving towards the poles, you can look at sea level rise, you can look at ice sheets melting. Everywhere you look, there are these trends. A trend means basically a line that's sloped. So you have time on one axis and something's moving inexorably in one direction, either up or down. All of those lines should be flat. If we lived on a healthy planet, they would all be flat. And there's thousands of them.
And there's a lot of idiots out there who go, there's been climate change many times in the Earth's history. Yeah. And it's like that took hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah. They're idiots. I don't know why it's so hard for them to get the real data and the real science into their brains. It's like, I feel like there's like a way that our brains, like there's the kind of a weakness in the human brain that sometimes short circuits. It's like a fuse blows in there. And no matter how much credible information you give them, they're going to just dig deeper into it's the weirdest thing. I've been doing this for 16 years again, and I still don't understand the brains of hardcore climate deniers. Very, very weird.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
I've read books about it. I know like what the psychologists say and stuff, but it's like, I really think it's a kind of mental illness, honestly. Because, if you talk to someone who has...
Well, it's a cognitive dissonance. I don't want the planet to be destroyed. Right. So I will subconsciously come up with a justification for how it's not being destroyed.
But it's like you show somebody like 3 oranges and you ask them how many oranges there are, and they say there's 4. And you say, but wait, there's 3, like 1, 2, 3. And they're like, no, there's actually 4 there. And it's like a mental illness. Like that's what it's like. So...
they've done studies where they've been able to create in people false memories of their childhood just by asking them several times whether it happened, and eventually they start to think it happened. But anyway.
Anyway, great talking to you.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed that,
Peter, and keep up the fight.
Yeah, thanks. All right, talk to you later, Lee.
Later. That was Peter Kalmus. Follow him on Twitter. NASA climate scientist. And, I'm sorry, folks, for those of you who believe that simply because I am willing to look in at all the stuff that's covered up by our media and everything that's being covered up means that I therefore will just ignore what 99.9% of scientists are saying. No, that's not how I work. And honestly, if you thought that's how I worked, then you probably shouldn't be listening to me, because that would be a fucking idiot who ignores all scientists and says, oh, no, I found the one guy who's funded by big oil who happens to say the thing I like. If you're doing that, then you might want to wonder why the other billion scientists are saying the opposite. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. I have one more article here. I didn't get to bring it up while Peter was on here, but this is from the LA Times, so I suppose give them some credit. They did mention climate change. But I find it interesting to see how some of these people cover climate change. And so first, let me say, this article is largely great, but it is rare, and it's only happening now. Like, we're getting to a place. These articles should have come out 20 years ago. I've done segments on Redacted about how big oil internally and our government, which is big oil, right? Our government is the fucking big oil company. They knew about climate change starting, the first reports were 1959. They said, hey, fossil fuels will cause climate change. Now, some of the predictions were off, but they had it right. And then in the 70s, many of the predictions have been 100% accurate as to the rate of climate change. So they knew about this shit for decades, and no one said anything. Complete silence. Anyway, so now we have our media basically is starting to feel a slight pressure to maybe cover some of this shit more often than they were. I know if you turn on Fox News, they go, oh my God, it's just, if you turn on CNN, it's just climate change all day long. No, not if you actually look at the numbers. As Peter mentioned, there was more coverage of Bezos going to space for 4 minutes in one day, more coverage in that one day than there was for climate change the entire year, maybe the past 2 years. So don't kid yourself that there's, tons of climate change coverage. I also did a segment on Redacted Tonight a year ago where one of the main news, Frontline or something, one of the main news channels was, or news shows was covering the forest fires, historic forest fires in Los Angeles. Well, guess what? They're not historic if they happen every year now. But they were covering the forest fires, never mentioned climate change. A 15-minute in-depth coverage of the forest fires in California, never said the words climate change, never said the words planet heating up. Anyway, let me share this article. So thank goodness LA Times did do a climate article. But it's a column. Again, this is opinion, which means they're not really getting behind it. If you read New York Times or whatever, it means they're somewhat getting behind it, but they're not. It's not a report on their front page. They put it in the opinion section, and opinion can be all over the map from these newspapers. So they get away by hiding stuff in the opinion section. Anyway, opinion, the end of the world is coming, even if you've heard it all before. And he goes on to talk about how fucked the IPCC report is, etc. But, well, hold on a second. I want to find the part where he talks about economics, because I was looking at this report and I was like, if he goes through this whole article talking about how bad climate change is, why it is we aren't changing, why it is we're doing nothing about it, why it is that we seem just on this path straight towards destruction of the planet, and he never talks about economics. He never talks about the fact that we live in a profit-based system, a greed-based system, then that's fucked. And so I looked up and this is his only mention of other than saying economies are going to collapse. This is the only one talking about how our economy is set up. And it says, our economic system rewards corporate behavior that maximizes short-term profits for shareholders rather than long-term planning for the future or a more stable world. Did you catch that? If you want to sum that up a little more clearly, capitalism be fucked. Okay? He doesn't want to say that. He wants to put it in all these nice little words. An economic system that rewards corporate behavior for a short-term gain. And capitalism be fucked. That's what he's really saying. Because if you think about it, you break it all down, an economic system that maximizes profit over all else, including our survival, including our future, including the future of your children, then that means capitalism be fucked. But they can't say that. So instead they say this. Our economic system rewards corporate behavior that maximizes short-term profits for shareholders rather than long-term planning for our future. Yeah, because long-term planning for the future is not capitalism. Capitalism rewards profit over all else, an immediate profit over all else. But again, that can't be talked about. That's a third rail. can't be said in the LA Times. We have a system that rewards exactly what we are doing. We have a system that rewards profit over our futures. And it's like, look, I am all for activism that achieves smaller gains as well. Like Peter was saying, you kind of got to do everything, do all the things you can do to deal with this. So if there is activism that's trying to get a specific bank to not give a loan to a specific oil company so that a specific pipeline doesn't get built, so that that pipeline doesn't go through a specific community, then yes, I'm for that activism too. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, they're not really talking about capitalism. They're just talking about that one pipeline. Fuck it. No, do it all. Go after all of it. But let's also not kid ourselves that this is an economic system where the gravity of this system pulls you towards profit over life. That's how it is. That's what it is. So we need a climate revolution. And, we need a revolution in general. But I think that the most, here's the thing, the most dire risk to our futures is climate catastrophe, with the possible exception of nuclear Armageddon. But, one of them is a definite, this is the path. If we keep going the way we're going, this is the absolute path. Climate catastrophe. Whereas the other one is like, it could happen. Fucking the U.S. could decide to shoot a nuke at Russia tomorrow, and Russia could decide to fire back, and then we're all fucked. Yes, that could happen tomorrow. But that's not a sure thing. Whereas climate catastrophe is a sure thing as long as we stay on this path. Absolute. So, keep running around with your heads in the sand. Those of you who want to pretend this isn't happening, those of you who want to pretend it's all lies, that the ruling elite went around and got all the scientists who say the opposite of what you're seeing in your news media, got them all in a big sack to agree. 99.9%. What is it? They actually did a study. 99.7% of scientists. And the 0.3% that don't say climate change is happening are like obviously funded by big oil. Like, you can see that they literally say on their LinkedIn profiles, I'm a Chevron scientist. Anyway, I love you guys. If I see amazing question or topic in the next 3 seconds, I might talk about that for a minute. But in general, please become a member at patreon.com/LeeCamp. Hoping to start a new show probably mid-May is the hope. It's not going to be the big news studio like Redacted Tonight, so I don't want to hype it too much, and then you all go, you're in front of a green screen, so go fuck yourself. No, I'm not going to have $1 million news studio, but hopefully it will still be good and you'll still like it. That's my goal. And I'll still get to talk about all these things, talk about climate revolution, and talk about how we should create a livable and happy and sustaining future for all. So please join up at patreon.com/LeeCamp. The lowest level is $1.25 a week. $1.25 a week. So I hope you can do that and join up. Let's see what else. There's a new Common Censored podcast just came out today. There's a new Government Secrets podcast came out Friday, or well, the live stream was Friday. It should be up any minute now. Check out my 4-part series on the truth about World War I. Hope you'll enjoy that. The podcast is called Government Secrets. And yeah, all this stuff is at patreon.com/LeeCamp. Keep fighting.